is to just give us like a 30 to 60-second spiel on your background, who you are, and then tell us what you ultimately want to get out of the mastermind. So Ashley, if you want to, you can go first.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. I am Ashley Cullis. I am a nurse. That is what my true occupation is right now. I actually teach nursing at a community college. I have been, I'll say, dabbling in real estate with wholesaling. We started off with wholesaling some years back, and then I stopped doing that for a while because I went back to school to earn my doctorate, and then tried to get to it and was doing pretty decent. Then COVID hit and got back out of it again. And so here we are now, 3 years later. And what I hope to get out of the mastermind, I just hope to soak in as much information as I can possibly. With my background being nursing, I know a lot about healthcare. So I'm anxious and excited to learn about something completely different. And I am glad to be here. And if I ask any questions that seem stupid, I apologize, but I just want to learn everything I can.
Well, glad to have you here with us. April, do you want to go next? Or is she muted and MIA?
Sure, I'm still here. Well, it kicked me off and then I got back on. So what am I supposed to do?
Just give a 30 to 60-second like background on who you are, maybe some things that you've done into real estate up to this point, and then what do you ultimately hope to do through the mastermind?
Okay. Well, I am April Robinson. I'm Ashley's sister. We are, she told you she's a nurse. I'm a nurse. I've done nursing education and now I'm a school nurse. And I have done some wholesaling with Ashley, and we were looking into buying and flipping houses. And then she started talking about Josh, and I said, well, let's do this instead. And I want to not be 62 and retire. I want to retire early because I'm 39. And I want to just make sure my kids are set for the future and their kids and generations after that.
Whoop, whoop. Excellent. And then Ro, it's my first time ever actually getting to see your beautiful face there. I see Chris didn't get to make it.
Yeah, I texted him to see if he was coming, but I haven't heard anything back. My name is Ro Carter. I live in Dallas, Texas. I own a gun business called Mr. Guns. I have a range and also have a second store. I've been invested in real estate for probably 20 years. I own about 30 rental units, give or take. Mostly self-finance. I was originally going to be like a pension fund manager type guy. I was educated at IU, so I got a couple master's degrees and things like that, and some other industry certifications. And I was going to be a investment manager, and then my gun business took off, and it didn't make sense to try to break into that business anymore. So I started investing in real estate. It's a passion of mine. What I hope to get out of this is a good network of solid people that more people to talk real estate with. It's always fun, and move on into larger and larger projects so that I can get bigger stuff financed instead of, $1 million or less type projects. So.
Bam, bam. Where did you say you were based out of?
Dallas, Texas.
Dallas. There's a couple of people.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in McKinney if you want me to get specific, but
Okay.
Texas is still Texas.
it is. Texas is Texas. Most of my real estate is in North Louisiana though, because of tax reasons. Things like
Got it.
Yeah.
Texas. We got a handful of Texas folk here, as you can already tell. They're rooting and hollering. All right. Well, excellent. It's great to have all you guys on board. And honestly, I love to see when the room here is full. In my opinion, this is fairly full for a lot of the calls that we do. So I like being able to see everyone. let everyone get the chance to kind of tune into these calls live, ask any questions that you have. And so what we're going to be going over today, now that we're already recording, is part 9 of due diligence. So we've gone over a lot of due diligence up until this point. We've gone over a handful of the step-by-step acquisition guide. We went over the due diligence checklist. We went over a lot of granular details when it comes to due diligence. But what we're going over today are actually some additional reports, sometimes required by lenders. Some of them will be, and it'll be lender specific. Others maybe not necessarily required by lenders, but reports that you nonetheless want to have put together either by a third party professional or by a property manager or whoever. And we'll talk about the specifics of those today. But yeah, let's jump in. Excuse my water breaks. All right, everybody can see this, right?
Yes, sir.
Due diligence part 9 reports. So these are going to be somewhat different than a lot. They're going to kind of coincide with what we've gone over already as far as the step-by-step acquisition guide and the due diligence checklist. But some of these are going to be independent that we haven't actually talked about yet, or that we've talked about, but we haven't gone into deep detail about yet. So number 1, due diligence reports. After putting a deal under contract, the due diligence process for an apartment building is much more involved and complicated than most people think, or that you guys are slowly starting to find out. For the real estate due diligence process on a single family property, lender will likely only require an inspection report and an appraisal report in order to provide you with financing. When you scale up to hundreds or thousands of units, the increase in the number of potential risk points is such that the lender will require additional reports prior to financing the deal. And you want to obtain these reports yourself before deciding to move forward. So just be an additional part of the entire process. For the multifamily due diligence process, you want to obtain and analyze the results of these 10 reports. Your financial document audit, your internal property condition assessment, your property condition assessment, which is going to be more exterior based, but also lender specific. Your market survey, your lease audit, your unit walk, site survey, environmental site assessment, appraisal, and then the green report, which isn't necessarily a required report, but we can talk about the benefits of getting something like that. So today we're going to be outlining the contents of each report, how to obtain them, the approximate cost of each for properties 100 units or more, just as like a rule of thumb as far as cost goes, and how to analyze the results. All these reports are kind of outside the purview of the due diligence checklist that we've previously gone over, meaning these are additional reports that you'll want to obtain. And some of them actually do somewhat coincide in some of the things we've already talked about. And they're things that you can obtain from some kind of third party or from that third party company that we use, Heritage, which we'll also mention a little bit in here. So we got a lot to cover. Let's jump in. Number 2, or really number 1, financial document audit. Financial document audit is analysis that compares the property's historical operations to your budgeted income and expense figures you set when underwriting the deal. It's an optional audit, but definitely recommended. Not necessarily something that the lender is requiring or what have you, but this is basically a secondary addition to your primary underwriting. It's kind of like getting a third, second, fourth, however many, set of eyes on your financials and your overall business plan. For the audit, a third-party consultant will collect detailed historical financial reports from the sellers, including the last 1 to 3 years of income and expense data, bank statements, and rent rolls. The output of the analysis is a detailed spreadsheet of the asset's historical income, operating expenses, non-operating expenses, and net cash flow, which are compared to the budgeted figures you provided in your own underwriting. The summary will take on a form that is similar to a pro forma, with the income and expenses broken down into each individual line item for an easy comparison on your end. They'll also provide you with an executive summary document, which will outline how to interpret the audit, what data was used to create the audit spreadsheet, and an explanation of any figures that deviate from your specific budget or pro forma or financials or underwriting or whatever you want to call it. To obtain this document, you'll need to hire a commercial real estate consulting firm that specializes in creating financial document audits. An approximate cost for this report is around $6,000. Now, I don't believe that Heritage actually does this, but there are some other companies out there that do. I don't have any names off the top of my head, but if you guys wanted to know names, I can go find ones that we've had done before and let you know. When you initially underwrote the deal, you set the income and expense assumptions based on how you and your team will operate the property once you've taken over. These assumptions came from a combination of the trailing 12 months of income and expense data and the current rent roll provided by the seller and the standard market cost per unit per year rates for the expense. Once you receive the result of the financial audit report, part of your real estate due diligence is to go through each income and expense line item and compare them to the assumptions in your underwriting model. Ideally, the consultant has performed the audit already and compared the results to your provided budget, made adjustments based on your expertise and any inputs you provided, and then, of course, commented on any discrepancies. So this will be a report where they're looking exactly at what you have, all of your financials, doing their own due diligence, and looking at your financials and determination of if your business plan is actually executable. And then if any discrepancies were found, or if the consultant recommended any adjustments, discuss them with your property management company to see if you need to update your budget. If you and your management company come to the conclusion that the budget needs to change, make the necessary adjustments to your underwriting model. So next one, number 3, internal property condition assessment, or PCA for short. The PCA is a detailed inspection report that is an integral part of your real estate due diligence because it outlines the overall physical condition of the property. This report is typically included when you hire your third-party due diligence company, such as Heritage. So Heritage actually has a variety of different packages. You can go in and say, hey, I just want you to do all of the actual physical due diligence. I just want you to inspect all the sewer lines and the inside, or call it just the inside of the units. They say, okay, we'll charge you this much per unit for just that. You say, okay, well, can you do that, but also scope the sewer lines and also do this and also do a lease audit and also look at the roofs and also look at all the, like, can you do all these other things? And of course, all that adds on to the price. And depending on how large the asset is, they give you like a bulk discount price if it's, multiple hundreds of units or even 100 units. But if it's a smaller property and you want them to do all that, then obviously the price will kind of fluctuate. It just depends. A licensed contractor or Heritage will inspect the property from top to bottom. Based on the inspection, he or she will prepare a report with recommendations, preliminary costs, and priorities for immediate repairs, recommended repairs, and continued replacements, along with accompanying pictures of the interiors, exteriors, and the items actually needing repair. Being an internal report, you'll be responsible for hiring this licensed commercial contractor to perform the assessment. An approximate cost for this assessment is about $2,500, unless you hire Heritage, at which point there's a discount for purchasing this as a part of the package, like we were just talking about. During the underwriting process, you created a renovation CapEx plan for the interior and exterior or exterior of the apartment community, which included the estimated costs. Once you receive the internal PCA, compare the results to your initial renovation budget. The results of the internal PCA are preliminary costs, not exact costs. So everything that they tell you it's going to cost is just based on their experience. Because Heritage, whereas they have an arm of their company that does professional due diligence, their primary business is a construction company. So they are very familiar with costs in various markets and various asset classes. And so they'll give you what they believe the cost to actually be, or what they think their personal actual cost will be if you were to hire them. However, it may be different when you end up hiring someone else if you don't decide to hire them. Someone's trying to get in. I hate when this thing gets in my way. There we go. Not exact costs. However, they will most likely be more accurate than assumptions you made during the underwriting process. Therefore, if there are discrepancies between the contractor's estimated renovation costs and your renovation budget, update the underwriting model to reflect the results of the internal PCA. Hopefully, your initial renovation assumptions were fairly accurate. And ideally, if you made very conservative renovation cost assumptions, you discover that you over budgeted and can reduce the costs in your actual underwriting model. Now, that is the internal facing, personal, whatever you want to call it, PCA. So the other PCA, the other property condition assessment, is going to be very lender specific. It's going to be something they're actually going to pull depending on who they decide to hire or which lender you go with, honestly. Property condition assessment is the same as the internal property condition assessment, except this one's created by the third party selected by the lender. Costs approximately $2,000 depending on your market. You'd analyze this report the exact same way you analyze the internal one, although I personally like to go for the internal one as opposed to the other one, just because variety of reasons. Typically, you trust the person that you hired internally as opposed to some random third party that the lender pieced together and got to come look at your asset. Then compare and contrast the results of the two PCAs. Maybe the lender's contractor caught something that your contractor did not, vice versa. Not every lender actually requires this. Typically only the larger agencies will, like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Market survey, obviously very important. It's going to be something you're actually going to do internally, but also something that you can hire out, or honestly, depending on how close a relationship or how high level maybe even the PM is, or the PM that you're going to hire is, they can do it for you as well. Market survey is a more formal and comprehensive rental comparison analysis than the one you performed during the underwriting phase, which is why it is a necessary part of your due diligence. You'll already have done your own market research and made assumptions, and this report just aids in that research and gets your PM's full buy-in to the actual business plan. So for the market report, your property management company will locate direct competitors of the apartment community. Again, this is something you're going to be doing as well. This is just going to be that secondary data structure. And again, also aids in the assumptions that you made, getting your PM's full buy-in and having them back you, since they're going to be the ones running that day-to-day operations. Then they will compare your apartment community to each of the direct competitors over various factors to determine market rents on an overall and a unit type basis. A few key points on the market survey analysis is to make sure that your property management company actually uses apartment communities that are upgraded similarly to how your apartment will be post renovations and not its current condition. So not like this super dilapidated C-class asset and whatever they're collecting now in rents. I don't care about none of that. I want to know what it's going to be worth after I put all this money into it. And then you want to make sure that they're also in similar neighborhoods, built within a similar time period, similar vintage. Like you don't want them using a comp of some asset 50 miles away or something ridiculous like that. We had one broker try to pull us comps one time for an asset we were looking at buying. And it was somewhere in Mobile, well, on the west side of Mobile. And he pulled us a comp in like New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm like, dude, that's so many hours away from where I live. How is that a comp? Explain to me how this is a comparable. And he couldn't explain it to me. So when initially underwriting the deal, you set your renovated rental assumptions based on a combination of performing your own rental comparable analysis, and if the sellers had initiated any upgrade program and proven the higher rental rates. Compare the results of the market survey to your initial renovated rent assumptions. If there are any discrepancies, update your underwriting model to reflect the results of the market analysis. Now, before we go any further, we've gone over a handful of things. Does anyone have any questions over like the first half of what we've gone over?
I have a question.
Yeah. What you got?
So, you're pulling these. Is this being pulled with the underwriting team, like the bank that you're going with? And are they billing this, or are we paying this out like upfront? Or is this how does that do I pay this up front and then, or is this part of the closing process?
Yeah, that's something I cover like at the very end, but it's kind of twofold. So it depends on the lender that you go with, whether or not they decide to kind of like flow it into the actual end cost at closing, just included in closing costs.
Yeah.
Or they will require you to actually pay for it upfront out of pocket. And then you'll raise that capital from the back end from your investors as your reimbursement at closing.
Okay.
So as far as payment, that's how that works. But who's pulling the reports? It depends on the report. The bank is going to have certain reports that they actually require and will pull themselves, and they'll hire their own third party for that. But I 1000% believe that you should have some of your own reports pulled, like the financial document audit. That is not going to be something that they're going to require. They're going to do their own financial audit and their own determination of where they believe your deal can financially produce. But more often than not, they don't actually reveal their analysis to you. And even if they did, it's not going to be as accurate as someone who's a professional at doing something like this, nor someone who's maybe very familiar or much more familiar with that particular asset or that particular market. So again, this is an optional audit that you would hire someone else for, and you would basically have to pay for out of pocket, since it would be not required by the lender. The internal property condition assessment, also something you're going to be paying for, because this is a company you hire similar to something like Heritage, who comes and does all the work for you. And there's a handful of things that they're going to, like, all these reports are about to go over. They can do a handful of them. They can do all of them, but they can do a handful of them. But that would be a report you pull. The PCA is going to be lender specific. So the lender will pull that one. And then the market survey is very specific to your Um, basically your
Your
PM.
area. Yeah.
Yeah. Like whether or not you get your PM to pull this or have your broker, honestly, broker can pull the market survey as well. They can give you a lot of this deep, detailed information. And then it's free. It's a report that you have. It's part of that CoStar report that we were talking about when you're like picking your target market, but this will be specific for the market survey of that asset.
Okay.
Did anyone else have any questions?
Hey, Josh, a quick question. So the financial audit, the first one,
Mhm.
that's essentially it's to validate your pro forma assumptions as far as
Right.
operating expenses. So it kind of gives you between that and the market analysis, it allows you to pretty much vet your pro forma. Is that correct? How to
Yeah,
see
I
it?
mean, it's kind of like I said, getting a second, third, fourth, however many set of eyes on your financials. Someone who's maybe a little bit more experienced, who literally does this for a living, like they get paid for a living to do financial analysis on multifamily deals. And so then they come in and just look at all of you, everything that you've laid out, and really just help you determine how realistic your assumptions actually are, is the primary thing they're really doing. Like, can you actually pay $20,000 a year for payroll for 5 employees? No, you can't. And I'm here what I think it's actually going to cost for that amount of employees in this market today in 2023 in March, like for an asset like this. They'll give you a lot of that deeper detailed scope, maybe some of what some people would consider tribal knowledge that you're just not going to know because maybe you've never closed a deal this large before.
Got it. And would you do all this above a certain amount of units, or even if it's like a 20-unit building, you would still do that?
It depends. It depends on the asset. And if it's just going to be, I guess it's kind of risk tolerance based a little bit. So if it's just going to be like me and Matt and Reggie, we're probably not going to hire someone else to do that because we're like, we feel confident in where we feel like we can take this deal. We've done this 10 times or however many at this point. And it's just the 3 of us anyway. We're not bringing in outside investor cash. So that may be a different story. But if I know I'm going to be raising a ton of money, and even if it's a market that I'm super familiar with, it's, every deal is different. So I may still bring someone in, or at least just get another set of eyes on it. Like give it to a mentor or give it to someone that I know has more experience than me that can just take a look at it, even if I'm not paying like a full report or something.
Sure, makes sense. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna jump back in. Lease audit, number 6.
Hey, Josh,
What's that?
can you share the heritage information one more time? Just because we have some new folks.
I think it's Heritage. Is it CSS or was it CCS.com? It's one or the other.
I found it. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Perfect. Lease audit. We've talked about this before. This is something Heritage can definitely do for you, and 1000% something I would pay for it every time, regardless of the size of the deal. Your property management company will collect all the leases of the current residents at the apartment community and perform an audit, or Heritage. They'll analyze each lease, recording the rents, security deposits, concessions, and terms. Then they'll compare the information gathered from the leases to the rent roll provided by the owner, recording any discrepancies. Unless the current property management company was extremely incompetent, the discrepancies should be minor. There's been a couple of times where there have been some glaring discrepancies, if there are any at all. And hopefully it shouldn't affect your financial model much at all. But again, also a third-party report that Heritage can do for you outside of the purview of the actual PM. So you could try to get your PM to do it, but then it goes back to how much do you actually trust the PM? How analytical and detail oriented are they really? Are they going to miss something? Is it going to be something large that they shouldn't have missed? So sometimes it's just better to pay someone that does it for a living anyway. And then number 7, unit walk. So unit walk bleeds a little bit into the PCA, the internal property condition assessment. But really the unit walk here is going into a little bit more specifics of what they're actually going to be looking for when giving you the PCA. So we talked a little high level when we talked to PCA. The unit walk is specifics of what they're doing with the PCA. So it's kind of one report, but we put it 2 places here. You absolutely want to make sure that you or a professional walks every single unit. Don't be the guy that thinks you can walk 50 out of the 100 units and then you're solid. I promise you, you're not solid. During the unit walk, your property management company or Heritage will inspect the individual units. The purpose of the unit walk is to determine the current condition of each. So while conducting the unit walk, they'll take notes on things like the condition of the rooms, type and condition of appliances, presence or absence of washer dryer hookups, conditions of the light fixtures, missing GFCI outlets, and anything else that stands out as potential maintenance or resident issue. Once you receive the report, compare the results to your interior renovation assumptions to determine the actual accuracy of your interior business plan or CapEx renovation business plan. Do the number of units that require interior upgrades match what your assumptions were actually on your business plan? Is there unexpected deferred maintenance that wasn't accounted for in your budget? Are there a high number of residents who will need to be evicted once you've taken over operations? Using that data, you can create a little bit more of a detailed unit by unit interior renovation plan and calculate a more accurate budget. Then make any of those adjustments to your interior renovation assumption on your financial model. So that'll all be a part of the CapEx plan, really, on what you think needs to be handled, both deferred maintenance. You could include deferred maintenance in your CapEx budget, and then anything that you actually planned on legitimately renovating, like deferred maintenance being their person's stove hasn't worked in 6 months and they've been calling and no one comes out to fix it. It's deferred, so it's going to need fixed, but really it's going to be a part of CapEx, just buying a brand new stove and getting it in there, or buying a part, like a simple part that they just haven't gone in and fixed, whatever the case is. So number 8, site survey. This is going to be something that is required by your lender, probably something that they're going to pull and could potentially be rolled into closing costs, or depending on the lender, they may require you to pay for it up front. Site survey resembles a map and shows the boundaries of the property, including the lot size, also includes a written description of the property. A lot of third-party services that can conduct a site survey. Quick Google search of site survey and city name will do the trick. I recommend reaching out to multiple companies to get a handful of bids for your project. The approximate cost for the site survey is about $6,000. And again, all these approximate numbers are based on the property being around 100 units. That was just kind of like my rule of thumb size deal for these costs. Site survey report will list any boundary, easement, utility, and zoning issues for the property. Generally, if a problem is found during the site survey, the bank will not provide the loan. So if something does come up during the due diligence report, your options are limited, should be addressed on a case-by-case basis. If for whatever reason the problem cannot be resolved, you're probably going to have to cancel the contract. So number 9, environmental site surveys. This is really your phase 1 and phase 2 reports. If you end up having to get a phase 2, most of the time, a simple phase 1 is satisfactory enough. The environmental site assessment is an inspection that identifies potential or existing environmental contamination liabilities. So this is like if there's a gas station that used to be on your property and there's oil underneath there, or gasoline, or any number of environmental liabilities. It will address the underlying land as well as any physical improvements to the property, and will offer conclusions or recommendations for further investigations if an issue is actually found. The environmental site assessment is also performed by a third-party vendor selected by your lender, and the approximate cost is about $2,500. Similar to the site survey, if the vendor identifies an environmental problem, the lender will not provide a loan for the property. Again, these issues should be addressed on a case-by-case basis. Then you have the appraisal, which is fairly straightforward, but there are some tips and things I've learned along the way as far as appraisals go. So the appraisal report created by an appraiser selected by your lender and determines the as-is value of the apartment community. Costs approximately $5,000 for that 100-unit rough size. The appraisal will inspect the property and then calculate the as-is value of the apartment community. The 2 appraisal methods that will be used to determine the value of the property are the sales comparison approach, comparing the subject property to similar properties that were recently sold, and the income capitalization approach, using the net operating income and the market cap rate. I highly recommend you shoot for the income capitalization approach. Building rapport with the appraiser while on site can help you accomplish this goal. Now, sometimes they do like a dual kind of analysis, so they actually try to use both in their actual analysis. But as we know, since the reason we like multifamily so much is because you can use net operating income and market cap rate to directly give you what the actual value of the asset is. That's definitely the route that we like to shoot for. So what I usually like to do, if I know that there's going to be an appraisal happening and we're going through the due diligence process with the deal, I like to just connect with the lender and whoever they've hired for the appraisal And I like to try to figure out exactly when the appraiser is going to be on site, what date, what time, what exactly are they going to be looking at, so that I can actually meet the appraiser on site the day that they're going to be walking in. Now, if for whatever reason you're not local and this is a property like super far away, then I would try to conduct, depending on what the time frame is, it may not be conducive, but I would try to conduct all of your on-site due diligence if you do have to fly out and go tour this property at the same time that all these other third-party reports are going to be rolling in, so that you can be there on site communicating with the appraiser. Because when I say building rapport with the appraiser, literally just telling them your business plan and the story that you have for the deal and just a little bit more about yourself. Honestly, that can go a long way in, believe it or not, determining the value of the asset. So rapport with you really has nothing to do with the value of the property, right? But you'd be surprised how lenient they can be and how much more value they'll give you if you're all buddy and building trust there. So I usually like to go out and just communicate with them, let them know what we're doing. And that has gone a long way in the past. It hasn't failed me yet. So we continue to try to do that. Once you receive the appraisal, you should compare the appraised value to the contract purchase price as part of your due diligence. The lender will base their financing on the appraised value, not the contract price. Therefore, if the appraisal comes back at a value higher than the contract price, fantastic. It's essentially free equity. However, if the appraised value is lower than the contract price, you'll have to either make up the difference by raising additional capital or renegotiate the purchase price with the seller. So then the last report, the green report, what is that? How does that benefit me? This is a report that is not required. It's not going to be the differentiating factor between a lender loaning something to you or not, but it is something beneficial as an additional value added play. Like, what are the different types of ways that you can add value to a deal? So this list is not going to be all inclusive, but this is a lot of the things that we've looked at before and have actually implemented on deals before in terms of that additional value add. So the green report is an optional assessment, evaluates potential energy and water conservation measures for the apartment community. The report will include a list of all measures found, along with the associated cost savings and initial investment. And there's a ton of different companies out there that can do this for you. And they're all going to be specific to their niche, which you'll see here in a second. The report's created by a third-party vendor, either selected by you or your lender. Most of the times the lenders aren't doing this. It's typically you. Approximate cost is $3,500. Depends on how much you're wanting them to do, like to actually analyze what the savings are going to be, depending on what you're trying to install. The green report, which is the only document that won't disqualify a deal, will outline all the potential energy and water conservation opportunities. It'll list all the opportunities that were identified, the estimated initial investment to implement, the associated cost savings, and the total return on investment. Deciding which opportunities to move forward with should be based on the payback period and the projected hold period of the property. For example, the following energy efficient opportunities were identified at a property we were reviewing once: dual pane windows, wall insulation and leakage sealing, roof insulation, programmable thermostats, low flow shower heads, toilets, interior and exterior LED lighting, EV charging stations, solar panels, and Energy Star rated refrigerators and dishwashers. After actually analyzing the investment amount and cost savings, the associated savings and payback periods were: for dual pane windows, they can reduce energy costs by around 10 to 25% per year. This is all kind of like average numbers here. For property with an annual energy bill of 100,000, savings could range from 10 to 25,000. Wall insulation and leakage sealing ranges about 10 to 20% by drastically reducing heating and cooling costs. And again, that's 10 to 20% based on that $100,000 number. Roof insulation, insulating the roof can reduce those heating and cooling costs as well. And that's roughly around 10 to 15% per year based on actually where you are, depending on how much heating and how much cooling there is throughout the year. Programmable thermostats can save 10 to 15% as well. Low flow shower heads and toilets can save 20 to 30% on water and wastewater costs. So if you had a bill of 50,000, savings could be about 10 to 15. Interior and exterior LED lighting actually saves a ton. So LED lighting can save up to 75% on lighting costs. For property with an annual lighting bill of 25,000, the savings could range from 18,750 per year. Now, the caveat is LED lighting is fairly costly, especially if you're implementing it on the entire exterior or the entire interior of an asset. So that's when it would come into play of looking at what's the time frame of my hold? If I'm only holding this for 5 years and it's going to take 25 years for me to pay off the investment of installing all this LED lighting, then it doesn't make sense. If I'm going to hold on to this deal in perpetuity and I'm going to pay it off in 10 years, and then it's going to be nothing but, almost $20,000 a year in savings, then sure, this may be an investment we should highly consider. So you're kind of looking at it from a couple of different angles. You got EV charging stations. They can attract more tenants, generate additional revenue. The savings are ultimately going to depend on the number of EV users and the charging rates. How many actual like Tesla drivers you have at your asset. So some of that's also going to play into the actual asset class that you determine to acquire, type of asset. So if you're buying a C-class asset, I mean, probably no one's owning a Tesla and needing a charging station. So maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're buying a higher B+ A-class asset in a really great part of town, then yeah, maybe it makes a ton of sense. And that's just going to be an additional way for you to, one, make more money, but two, just attract a higher caliber of tenant. Then there's solar panels. We've never done this before because it's typically extremely costly and takes many decades to pay off. But solar panels can significantly reduce energy costs and even generate revenue through net metering or selling excess energy back to the grid. Savings will depend on the size of the solar system, the amount of the energy consumed, and the cost of electricity in the area. And then lastly, Energy Star rated refrigerators and dishwashers, they typically can save up to about 30% on energy costs. So for a property with 100 units and 200 refrigerators and dishwashers, savings could range from about $6,000 to $9,000 a year. You'll find that the green report will list all the opportunities, even if the payback period is absurdly long. Like I've seen a payback period of like 90 years. I'm like, who's doing that? We always stick to the opportunities that either result in a payback period lower than our projected hold time or address a resident safety concern. So like lighting, for example. Even if lighting isn't the most financially beneficial over the course of whatever hold period you're doing, but it's going to be a longer term benefit for safety and security, then maybe it's something you would consider investing in. Number 12, how to pay for the due diligence reports. So this is what we were talking about, Paul. Usually the cost of the real estate due diligence reports will not be due until closing. So when underwriting the deal, make sure you're taking these costs into account when determining how much equity you need to raise. But other times you'll need to pay for different due diligence reports up front, like the ones that aren't lender required, right? So if this is the case, you can do one of two things. You can pay out of pocket, reimburse yourself at closing, or you can take a loan from a third party, maybe one of your passive investors, and reimburse the initial loan amount with interest at close, if you wanted to do it that route. A lot of creative structures. You guys know I like creativity. That's one of them. So we got two more things to cover here. Final review, number 13. Based on the financial document audit, market survey report, lease audit report, and green program report, you'll either confirm or update your income assumptions. Financial document audit will help you confirm or update your expense assumptions. The two property condition assessments and the unit walk report will lead you to confirm or update your renovation budget assumptions. Based on the appraisal report, you'll either confirm the accuracy of the purchase price or determine that you have the property under contract at a price that is below or above the as-is value. And based on the site survey and environmental survey, you'll determine if there's anything that disqualifies the deal entirely. So once you've received all the results of all 10 due diligence documents, made the necessary adjustments to your underwriting model, you'll need to review your return projections. If you had to make any drastic changes to the income, expenses, or renovation budgets in the negative direction, then the new return projections will be reduced. In some cases, the return projections are reduced to a degree that just doesn't even make any sense anymore. Also, if an issue came up during the site survey or the environmental site assessment, which is rare, but that will need to be resolved immediately, much prior to actually ever closing on the deal. If the seller's unwilling or unable to address the issue, your lender will not provide financing on the property, which means you'll have to cancel the contract, unless it's some kind of owner financing or something creative. But even then, I'm not one to buy a deal if there's a legitimate like survey, property specific, or environmental issue, because that's just going to haunt you. If the updated return projections fall below your investor's returns goals, adjust the purchase price in your underwriting model until the projected returns meet the goals, then explain to your real estate broker that you want to renegotiate. And state the reasons, right? The justification all goes back to that when it comes to negotiations for doing so. If the seller will not accept, don't be afraid to walk away from the deal. At the end of the day, it's your job to not only grow your investor's capital, but to also preserve it. So then the last thing I wanted to go over when it comes to due diligence, kind of tie some of this in when it comes to like getting these reports and things that specific third-party individuals are actually going to be looking for, These are 8 commonly missed due diligence items that I've heard people not pay attention to time and time again and seem to just get slapped in the face with when they don't take a look at it. So wanted to make sure you guys knew what those were. And honestly, ones that we've not paid super close attention to before that have slapped us in the face. So number 1 is aluminum wiring. From the mid 1960s through the 70s, due to high copper prices, aluminum wiring was installed on all new construction of multifamily buildings and residential homes. Typically, Fannie or Freddie will make you update these in order to even get a loan, and sometimes they won't even tell you until you already have the loan and get your first inspection, and then you have to actually make the upgrades, which was not budgeted at all if you didn't know that there was even aluminum wiring. Insurance costs are also drastically higher for properties with aluminum wiring. One of our properties, a 148 unit portfolio we own here in Mobile, we had to replace all the aluminum wiring. So we knew that there was aluminum, and we had it built into the CapEx plan that we were going to get all of those basically rewired, which is a massive pain and a huge CapEx expense. It cost us about 300 grand maybe to redo 92 units, pulling out all the old aluminum, ripping out the sheetrock, putting in all new copper, putting all the sheetrock back. And then typically, because the renovation was so extensive and you had to rip the sheetrock out and basically go down to the studs, a lot of contractors really just don't care about your property at that point. So they leave paint everywhere. They scratch up the floors. They damage this, they damage that. So now you have much more extensive renovations than you initially thought was going to be planned, which is where some of those overages come into play. But anyway, aluminum wiring, definitely something you wanted to check for and something you want to add in your business plan if it actually has that. And honestly, it may even be a deal you want to pass on. If you get further into the deal and find out that it has aluminum, and then you find out that your insurance cost is like 4x because there's aluminum wiring instead of copper. It's like, oh, well, now the deal doesn't even make sense anymore because insurance is too costly. And for me to actually replace all the aluminum wiring, it's also going to cost too much money from the equity standpoint, and then the returns don't make sense. So the deal just doesn't make sense anymore. Number 2, outlets. For 1969, many residential units didn't have grounding. So this is easy to see because instead of a 3-pronged outlet like you're used to seeing, the outlets will only be 2-pronged. They usually need to be updated to code, and is also a cause for higher insurance cost. Number 3, Federal Pacific or FPE stab lock breaker panels. These were installed from the 1950s to the 1980s and are potentially dangerous because if they fail, they cause fires. If you have these panels, you'll likely have to replace them due to lender requirements, but you should replace them anyway.
Yeah, I know.
To protect your asset and will help with insurance costs. Number 4, HVAC inventory. We've done quite a bit of due diligence on many different multifamily properties, and I've yet to see any seller have an accurate inventory of their HVAC system. You must look at each of these. It's best to have an HVAC contractor walk the property with you to get an assessment. So typically, Heritage has their professional, like they have a contractor or a professional on each individual. What am I trying to say? Piece. Like they have an HVAC, a roofer, an appliance guy, a floor guy, a sheetrock. Like they'll have all the different trades with them to get that accurate representation. This is the biggest repair expense that you're going to have outside of new roofs and stuff like that. So you need a good estimate of the number you'll be replacing that first year. You need to know Freon types, you need to know manufacturers, you need to know tonnage, condition of the units. Typically they're split systems, but not always. Also, where are your condensers? Are they on the roof? You might want to build in the cost of buying a lift. Otherwise, you'll be renting one every time you have to change out a condenser, thereby doubling your cost. And this is also information that Heritage can get for you. This thing's always in my way. This thing at the top that sells you like the Zoom thing. Anyway. 5, cast iron sewer lines. If your asset was built prior to 1975, you likely have cast iron pipes for sewer lines. These are just a nightmare waiting to happen, corrode over time, and you will not escape the wrath of them breaking. It's only a matter, or it's not a matter of if they will break, it's when. When scoping the lines, your plumber can't really tell what type of material the pipes are made of unless you see rust, and then it's obvious. They're looking for possible areas that will cause clogs, such as tree roots, bellies, low areas in the pipes, etc. This will be something you'll want to replace if holding in perpetuity, or to simply be aware of if you're wanting to sell in a few years. So if you know that there's cast iron sewer lines, but you know you're only going to be holding for 3 years, and the sewer line seems to be like it's in fairly good condition, then it may be somewhat of a moot point, because you hopefully at that point, you know, when you do go to sell, it's not going to be a massive problem for the new buyer. Because even if you're only holding for a shorter period of time, when you're looking at your exit strategies, you also want to look at who the end buyer is going to be and what are they going to be looking for when they go to potentially review your asset and determine whether or not it's viable for them to want to invest in and for them to buy. So then you're looking at, okay, if I know I'm going to hold on to this for 3 years and then sell it, and these pipes look like they only got 10 years left on them, then A, I need to go ahead and bite the bullet and replace them all. Or B, I'm only going to be able to sell to other syndicators that are looking to do like 5-year deals, and they sell it before the pipes actually go bad and before they'll need to be replaced. Water cutoffs on the property. We recently had a great time finding out that we needed these. When you're walking around, you need to look for water cutoff points already installed at each building. These are essential in making repairs so that you do not have to shut the water off to the entire property to make a simple repair to one unit. If there are none, plan to have some installed. So we have at one of our properties, the one that flooded that I was telling you guys about, there's only 3 shutoffs, and it's like one for each building. So when there's a water problem in a building, you have to shut water off for all the units, which is obviously not conducive. I'd much prefer them to be a little bit more detailed than that, hopefully on a unit by unit basis. But if not, it's not the end of the world. You know, this is just something to look out for, but it's not the end of the world. It's just going to be a massive inconvenience for your tenants, which they will remember in their desire or interest in wanting to continue to rent with you when their lease comes up for renewal. 7, to drive by at night. Part of your due diligence needs to be driving by the property at night. So help you get a sense of how safe your property really is. You can also see how well or poorly lit the property is. One of the best things you can do to protect the property and your tenants is to light the place up at night. Thieves don't like well-lit areas, and this is ultimately just going to help attract the right type of tenant base. And then lastly, number 8, balconies or upstairs porches. Any asset built more than 15 years ago was built with a structural code that was suspect. Typically, balconies or upstairs porches were cantilevered out with 2x4s or 2x6s, which are not strong enough for the load that they carry. Typical solution is to place 4x4 posts underneath to support them. If you don't, you run the risk of someone getting hurt and you ultimately getting sued. So that's it. That is part 9 of due diligence, with all these many, many reports and more stuff to do. And I know due diligence just seems like this massive behemoth that you'll just like never get over. And there's just seems like there's always new stuff to get and more stuff to pay for and more stuff to review. You just want to make sure you're doing all that you can, maybe not doing too much and wasting efforts in certain locations, but being a little bit strategic and doing everything that you can to really make the best educated decision on whether or not to move forward and whether or not your business plan is legitimately sound. So we got almost 30 minutes left today. So if anyone has any questions, now's time.
Hey, Josh, quick question. Did you ever experience internal audits and building assessments that reveal like a discrepancy or just mess with the underwriting so much that it was no longer attractive? Does it just make it like an unfortunate sunk cost?
When you say internal, you're talking about
Like non-lender
talking about the
required.
PCA, the financial document audit, or the PCA?
2 and 3, yeah.
2, not too much. It's more just like a confirmation that your financial analysis is accurate. So if you know that you know, or you know that you and your business partners know how to underwrite deals, how to be extremely conservative and or realistic with your assumptions, then you should be fairly solid there. I mean, one of the big benefits, probably not even to this, but more so with the other stuff, is going to be like CapEx. So getting other like legitimate contractors and stuff to come out and give you an exact budget on what it's going to cost to do everything, but also a timeline too. Because the contractors can tell you, hey, I know that here's all the stuff you want to do. it's going to take us 2 years to rewire all these units. And you're like, oh, shoot, I thought we were going to be able to finish it in 6 months. And now, your business plan's a little bit different than it was initially. So that's definitely massively important. As far as the internal property condition assessment, I would absolutely say that has been something that we found many issues before doing a deep detailed dive on the interiors of all the properties, because I know it says internal property condition assessment, but I mean internal in terms of like forward facing. But this is like just you and your business partners, your document, not a third party, not a lender that's hired under somebody. So they're not only looking at the interior, but they're looking at all the exterior too. They're truly giving you a deep, detailed physical condition of the entire property. So there's been many things that they found that we were like, oh, like scoping the sewer lines and finding out pipes, or like looking at the one thing I also didn't mention on there, which now that I'm thinking about it, I should have mentioned, because it's definitely something that you could potentially forget. But fire hydrants, you may not know, I didn't know. Luckily, this didn't happen to me, happened to someone I know. But the whole fire hydrant system, not just the hydrant itself, but like all of the plumbing underground, is actually owned by you once you buy that piece of property. Any fire hydrant system that's on your property, you now own and are completely 100% financially responsible for. So I know a guy that closed the deal once before, and then there was a random, in his county, I don't know if it was like every 5 years or every 10 years or something, but he just so happened to get the short end of the stick, just bought this deal. Months later, the city came by to do their inspection of the fire hydrant system, found out there was like some cracks or some leaks somewhere. They had to go underground and replace some piping, and they had to like replace the actual fire hydrant that was above ground too. Cost him like $200,000 for them to do that. And I was like, so it makes me laugh because it didn't happen to me. But thankfully he told me about it. So now I know, now I can tell you guys about it. So it doesn't have to happen to us. That's just another piece of due diligence to do to determine what the actual condition is of the fire hydrant system. Because again, the whole purpose of due diligence is to find issues, one, to either back out of the deal if they're like really horribly, or two, give you justification for renegotiation. So like you get the deal under contract at a certain price and you're super excited about the deal, but suddenly you find out, wow, this fire hydrant system is going to have to be replaced. Could cost me $200,000. That wasn't built into the financials when I gave you my offer. Not sure I'm going to be able to buy it at the same price. Either A, you can fix it, Mr. Seller, and we'll just call a spade, or you can give me a $200,000 credit and I'll just pay you $200,000 less at closing and I'll take care of it. Or you can negotiate it a different way if you want. You pay for half, I'll pay for the other half. I don't know, however you want to do it. So I would definitely say this one for sure is 1,000% one I would get for every deal. But the financial document audit, that's why I put here, it's optional. You can get it, you cannot get it. I don't know that it would be the end of the world as long as you feel fairly confident, or at least have had someone who's a little bit more experienced than yourself look at your numbers.
Got it. Thank you.
Nobody else? Questions? We went over a lot today.
Do you have any experience with conversion of like Class A office to residential or multifamily?
Is that what you're thinking about doing with that commercial building?
Not mine, hell no. A different one.
So it's an office building now, and you're talking just converting it into like multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
We've never done anything like that. I know people that have. So to answer your question specifically, no, I don't have any like legitimate experience with that, but I know the process that I would go through if I was thinking about doing something like that. Definitely find someone that has either done it before, or hire a company that does it for a living. Like a specific company that focuses on office to multifamily conversions, or just conversions in general. Like they just convert things, and they like adding walls and tearing stuff down and doing whatever. And I would see what their thought was on the actual viability of that even being an option when I'm looking at a deal before I ever even get it under contract. If they look at it and they're like, heck no, just forget about that as even an option, then easy. I don't need to get it under contract, not interested. But if they look at it and they're like, I think it could be we're gonna have to do some, like, is there blueprints that you got, or like, could I see more information? Then maybe that's stuff you could ask the broker or the seller to determine, or maybe they'll have, I don't know, maybe they'll have something to give you some more information. I would really just want to walk the property
Right.
before getting it under contract for something like that.
Okay. And then have you ever bought anything at an auction?
Like a multifamily property?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. Now that I'm thinking about it. Is that something you're thinking about doing?
I don't know. Open anything.
I don't know that I've ever actually heard of anyone buying multifamily at an auction. Most people buy the single family and the smaller stuff. I guess it's the same thing, just on a larger scale, but I just don't know that that caliber of a investor is getting to the point that they're like, not paying property taxes or getting foreclosed on, and then it goes to auction. But if it does,
that one I'd sent you something about that it was like cash only. That was because it was at auction.
which one was that one? How many
I
years was that?
don't remember when it was. It was last week sometime.
Interesting. So when you say cash only, like they literally want you to pay all cash, no loans, got to
Or
close
have
in
the
like,
financing already closed.
okay. Yeah, see, that just seems really complex. It seems like it almost seems like it's moving too fast. Because if you're buying at an auction, I mean, hopefully one, it's not a blind auction, because that'd be insane. And then two, typically, like at the auction steps, like you buy immediately, right? You buy it
Right.
and now you own it, and there's no due diligence you had the chance to do. So to me, that almost seems not financially savvy. Like, unless you can get the property for like $1, sure, I'll
Yeah,
buy it.
that's
I'll
right.
buy it for $1, and then see if it needs any additional help. It probably needs a lot of help for $1, but
Well, that's super risky for single family homes too. Like I've got buddies who've been sunk. Other people who flip houses, they've been sunk from buying them at auctions.
Do
So I
they,
wouldn't do it on a multifamily.
is that like a blind auction? Like they just have to buy it without ever getting a chance to see it?
Yeah, well, even the ones that aren't blind, a lot of times you don't have contingencies for inspections. You don't have anything like that. So things can come up, and that's it. And it's
You're
all
screwed.
cash. You're screwed. I've never bought one before, but
All to say, we don't want to be screwed, James.
I did that on my personal house. I'm good.
did you?
I think your list of what not to buy is, I'm pretty sure what I bought. A house full of all of them.
There you go. That's how it goes.
So now it's like I spend my weekends self-performing a lot of that work.
For the rest of
Learning the
your
hard
life.
way. Man,
Yeah.
way to learn everything.
1960s house. That's the way to go.
I just flipped one that was built in the 50s, and I'm so happy to be rid of that house. It's one thing after the other.
Issue after issue.
Aluminum wiring. I had that.
Did you have lead paint at that one?
Maybe.
You just,
But I didn't do anything about it.
you just painted over it and moved on.
Yeah.
As long
Hey,
as
at
your
that
kid
point,
doesn't
I mean-
eat it, you're okay.
I sealed it. Sealed it.
There you
We're
go.
good to go.
I didn't get the luxury of doing that because mine was a 1920s build and it was a historic home in the district. So I had like extra regulations I had to go through.
Gotcha.
So of course it had lead paint. And so
Natural.
I had to pay like 3 times the price to have someone come out, properly dispose of the lead paint, and then
Sucks.
put new coats over it.
Man.
Definitely sucked.
All on your first one, huh?
Yeah, all conducive to losing 60K.
It got you to the right place though.
All right. Does anyone have any other questions about due diligence? Anything,
So-
even outside of due diligence, just questions?
So Josh, just to recap again, since you said the best thing to do on your due diligence, it's to obtain and analyze these 10 reports. And the bulk of, it sounds like a few of these you're going to have to get prior, so that way you can just submit almost a complete file to underwriting at the financial institution. Is that right?
Not necessarily. They're typically going to pull their own reports. So some of those reports were reports that they will pull. They'll hire someone
Okay.
to pull it so that they can do their due diligence and basically aid in your ability to do yours, since you both are looking to achieve the same document. Now, of course, you're going to be the one paying for it, whether you pay for it then or pay for it at closing, but it's a report
Sure.
that you'll both need. And they're the ones that know whoever to come out or hire whoever to come out and do it. And then there's others that were more internally facing that will be just you going out and paying for individually, hiring a company like Heritage to go out and do that for you. So you're not out there like running around like a
Willy-nilly
chicken with
kinda
your head
thing,
cut off.
yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, how do I freaking do due diligence on 50 units? I don't even know where to start.
Right. So if that's the case, then it sounds like, and I think Justin asked it as well. It's going to probably be a sunk cost if we end up getting the reports back and it looks like, you know what, this is going to be $250,000. It's way out of budget or something of that sort, and we can't negotiate a deal. That's just something that we're just going to have to write off. Then, does that sound about right?
Oh yeah. As far as due diligence expenses, that's something that you would eat if you ended up not being able to close the deal, couldn't renegotiate. But hopefully by then, because the whole purpose of due diligence is that your money hasn't gone hard yet. So you get your EMD back. So in the case of these reports, you may, depending on how large the deal is, you may have spent 5, 10, 15, 20,000 bucks on like reports, which, I mean, in the grand scheme of things is a fairly decent amount of money. But hopefully you've got business partners too, and you guys can all split the cost. It's not just one person taking the load, or you've got a business partner that has tons of money and 20 grand is a drop in the bucket to them. But yeah, those would be hard costs if you, for whatever reason, were unable to close.
Okay.
Hey, Josh, I have a question, not on due diligence, but more on the mastermind in general. And maybe you explained this already, but would you mind walking us through like I would say like right now we're in March, for example, so we're going through due diligence. Like, do you have a clear plan of what we're going to go through in the coming months? Or, like, is there a clear schedule of the topics we're going to address or not necessarily?
So there is some structure for sure, but it's also a little bit fly by the seat of my pants. No, I'm just kidding. So due diligence, we're going to be finishing this out, and then we're going to get to like going through legitimate closing. Like, we've closed on the deal. Now, how do we kind of take over operations? So as we're like transitioning operations, transitioning property management, what does that look like? What needs to be done? What doesn't need to be done? Some of those things were included in the step-by-step acquisition guide, but going over more granular specifics of like how to execute on that. And then we'll get into actual asset management. So then it'll be like, okay, now we're in the deal, operating. How do I effectively manage my third-party PM? Because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to have your own property management company day one. So third party, what are some systems, operations, different things you can do to kind of set that up? And then I think sprinkled in throughout there, we're going to be touching base on underwriting some more, because I know a ton of people just continuously have questions about underwriting. So we'll sprinkle that in there a little bit. I'm thinking about having a call or two in the coming weeks or month, bringing on some guest speakers to talk about specific topics, like maybe raising capital or something specific. And then after that, it'll be kind of like a rinse and repeat. So then we'll be going over underwriting again. We'll go over more writing offers. So it'll be like once we go over it again, like after I've gone over it already, but maybe everyone hasn't heard it yet, then it'll be a revamp. So there'll probably be new documents, updated information, new stuff that's working in today's market, new ways to underwrite deal, new creative structure that we found, new ways to negotiate deals, new lead gen opportunities. Like there'll always be like new stuff, if that makes sense, that we'll be going over and talking about.
Josh, I'd love an opportunity to maybe walk a property that you are having due diligence, to maybe look at CapEx considerations, maybe look at it through your lens as you're kind of walking it. Is that a possibility? Yeah.
Well, the next time we get a deal under contract and start going through that process, keep you posted, since you're fairly local, and let you know when and where. If anyone else wants to come, well, I guess we don't want like 30 people coming, but We'll plan that out. Maybe we'll make it day specific. You know, today we have like 5-10 people come. Next day 5-10. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We don't want it. We don't want an army of like 30 people going on site to do due diligence. That'd be kind of scary. Raise a lot of red flags, especially if the seller doesn't want the PM to know that they're selling. So we had that before. But I think that's something we can do, Marcus.
Quick question, Josh, there's a potential we may have the ability to present to a couple good sized professional athletes. And what I was curious is, I've done this for some startups in the past. And so kind of approaching it almost like a startup presentation. Two things. What do you think is best to put in like a one pager? Because I've got a friend that's going to one of the camps where a ton of the guys are going to be. And then also, if we were to get on a presentation, since Jay and I are obviously very new to this, could we pop you in for like a few minutes of it to give some clout with it? And then you could be the Alabama arm if they're interested in that market. And then we're to some extent, because obviously, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would be fine with sharing those types of like investors as well, but it's an opportunity sometimes. Like that level of exposure doesn't come that often. And
These are like professional football players, baseball players.
Yeah, these would be baseball, but I've got a number of guys that know a ton of football players too. We presented to a number of NFL guys and on another venture in the past. And obviously I knew that venture really well, and had some exposure to it, but this would be a little bit different. So these guys are, obviously they have their investment guys, but they know, love, and understand and put a ton of money behind real estate. So it would make pretty clear sense to them. So there might be some potential in that. Yeah,
So
I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think there was a question in there somewhere, but it kind of ended with statements.
Yeah.
I think I would potentially be interested, in jumping on and helping you guys out. But I would want to know beforehand what we're discussing. You talked about one pager. Am I like helping pitch, or I'm just there to say, yeah, I've got experience. Come invest with us.
Well, I think it could be either or. In essence, if they're interested in the market you're in, because we're not doing anything out now. I'm not touching that market. So we could mention, yes, we're involved in both markets. You're in there as a mentor. And if they're interested in the Alabama market, you've got investors too. So it can be a mutual benefit. You see what I'm saying? It's a yes. I'm
Let me
asking
know.
You know what I'm saying? That's my question is a double. What are your thoughts on a one pager, and would you be interested or to connect with other investors for your market and then assist us to some extent on ours?
Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely be interested in jumping on the call and having a conversation with them. I don't know about the one pager. I would really want to know the specifics of the conversation. So am I talking to is it going to be like a classroom like this where a bunch of people jump in and we're all just like, I just got to pitch myself? Or is this like 1 to 5 conversation where it's just a couple of people and I'm really just wanting to do some more rapport building and help them learn more about what we do and what the perpetuity model is and how deals are structured and what we're seeing in today's market? Or am I really like pitching because they've got a ton of money and they're just trying to throw it at something?
Well, that's actually to the point of really, my thought was, in essence, explain what we do, what we're planning to do, and kind of tell them in general. That's what the one pager is for. I got to get their interest actually to even have the call, and just show them, yeah, I have interest in making XYZ% and getting my cash return in XYZ. Blah, blah, blah. These are the typical deals. This is a typical investment type, and we're planning to do this many acquisitions. Can I count on you to be?
How'd you get connected with a bunch of professional baseball players?
Dude, you'd be so. That's why people love Texas.
So KC, he's not on the call today, but KC in the mastermind actually is a professional football or baseball player in Austin.
Okay.
I don't know if you've connected with KC yet, but he would be,
No.
I mean, he speaks their language and plays their
Yeah.
sport. So he may be a great person to talk to.
Okay. For sure.
And Brock, you don't do baseball anymore, but you used to be a professional baseball player, right?
Yeah, it was short-lived. I played it a little bit after college, but I was playing indie ball, and I think Casey is actually independent ball as well. I'm not exactly where he's playing at, but yeah.
I don't know. I don't know enough about baseball, if I'm being honest with you. I just know he told me he plays professional ball.
You know, I was going to say, you know, one of the things that we do, and it might be something that we could all probably benefit, and I'm not to put you on the spot, Josh, but I think in regards to like what Alan's saying, you know, what we'll do is sometimes at where I work at Merrill, we'll put together like a pre-recorded video and basically saying, hey, you know, one of the things that we do is yada. If you definitely are interested in, definitely reach back out to your general manager or, you know, GP or something of that sort on these particular deals that may be coming up. That way it's just a pre-recorded. We show it in a video as part of our presentation, or like what Alan and Jay are talking about doing. Just throwing that an idea out there. It might be beneficial.
Yeah. Might prevent us from doing a lot of back and forth.
Right.
Alan, I'm just going to throw it out there. I'll be happy to share my expertise for the Jordan Park.
I love it.
You can go to an auction and buy it right from the doorstep.
That's it. Hey, I'll look at any opportunity if I think you can make money doing it.
That's it.
Chris, we finally get to see your face. You didn't join us earlier when we were doing introductions, but now you're here. Ro was here.
Yeah, Ro, they're having a tornado in Dallas, so he had to drop. But yeah, I was late due to work. Stupid W2.
Well, hey, I'm sure we probably have more questions, but real quick, what we did at the beginning that you had missed was any newcomer that comes in, what we typically like to do is just give us a quick, like 30 to 60 second little blip about yourself, and then tell us what's your ultimate goal in multifamily kind of through the mastermind.
Sure. So my name's Chris Shear. I'm based in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm married. I've got 2 kids. I've got an 8-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter. So that's kind of my why in terms of, you know, helping build a financial future for them. I'm in management consulting. I do supply chain consulting now. I've been in the W2 world for 20 years and have been a prudent saver and invested in equities and dabbled in real estate and sold a rental a couple of years ago and had a decent profit on it and saw how it was taxed and got a little more interested in that. Bought another rental, tried the short-term rental. So I like that, but really looking at syndication just from the ability to scale. So a big piece of that is, you know, I've read the books and understand the concepts, but, you know, really getting into the nuts and bolts, kind of like what we were going through in due diligence, you know, just to be able to have that from a structured perspective and then go out and figure out a way to do a deal. And I don't know if Ro introduced himself when he came on, but I met Ro in business school and we lived across the street from each other, and, you know, we trust each other and trying to do some deals together. So,
2 guys trying to make things happen. Whoop, whoop.
Yep. And if you need guns legally, he has the hookup on guns.
Legally. I love that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw his email was Mr. Guns. I was like, he's got to be into guns. There's no way you have an email like that.
He's either got hella
He's got an awesome range in Dallas. So if you're ever around Plano, he just opened up a new range.
Is it like an outdoor range?
No, it's indoor.
Indoor. Okay. Cool. Happy to have you guys on board, man.
Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
Did you have any questions? It looked like you were about to say something and then someone else said something. You just put your camera on. Maybe you were just taking a breath of fresh air. I don't know.
No, I was just around the due diligence piece and, you know, walking away, I guess, and incurring those sunk costs. I mean, have you had that happen to you where you couldn't negotiate on a point and you're like, all right, I got it. Like, how common is that? And like, should you plan for that in your business plan and have reserves like that?
It's a great question. I don't know how common I would say that it is. We've only ever had two deals. Actually, no, more than that. We had 3 deals that we had hard costs on that we had to walk away from. One was in the very beginning of our journey, our career, long before we had ever closed a deal. And we got it under contract and spent like 2 or 3 grand. It wasn't much at all before we decided it was no good. Then the other 2 were a little bit more recent. They were after we had already closed some deals. There was that 300-acre piece of land that we had under contract in Franklin, Tennessee, that we were going to build it was going to be fantastic, right? It was going to be like luxury, single family, like 5-10 acre lots, multi-million-dollar homes, super high end. I couldn't even explain it all. It was going to be really elaborate. I was pretty excited about what we're going to be able to do, but the market didn't make a lot of sense. This was around summertime to October-ish of last year. And so interest rates were shifting, market was shifting, luxury new developments didn't make a lot of sense. We ended up not being able to get the equity pulled together. We were going to go institutional for that because it was going to be like $100 million that we needed. It's going to be a lot. It's the biggest deal we've ever done, but we were stoked about it because we were like, sweet, we're going to check the box for being freaking awesome or whatever. I don't know, but we had some hard costs there. We had pretty hefty amount of hard costs, like 80 to 90 grand that we just lost when we decided to just back out and not pursue it. So luckily we were at that point, we had a lot more liquidity. We were in a lot better position. We'd already closed some deals. It still hurts nonetheless. I mean, any kind of capital hurts, but that was a really large deal. I mean, 300 acres, it was new development. So with new development, there's a lot more due diligence that goes into it, even more so than what we're talking about today, if you can imagine. And so there was more cost there associated with it. Like one of the big costs that we had was the perk test. So we had to get all of the land like percolated, which don't ask me exactly what that means. I kind of get the gist of it. I understand what it's used for, but I'm not a percolated kind of, inspector. So I don't know exactly what they're going out there and doing, but they had to percolate the entire 300 acres and it cost like 50 grand just for them to do that. And it took them like 8 months to do it. So there's much longer time span on new development, raw piece of land that you're turning into something. Anyway, yeah, we lost a handful of money there, but an actual multifamily deal that we had under contract one time that we decided not to pursue, I think was actually it was in 2022. It was around February of 2022. The market was still hot. Interest rates were great. They hadn't shifted yet. And it was a deal we were looking at in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And we got under contracts. We didn't know a lot about the market. The deals seemed pretty enticing and the financials made a lot of sense. Got it off market from a broker, right? And so we go out there, go through the negotiation, get it under contract, schedule our due diligence, and then like our on-site due diligence. Then we get there to do the on-site due diligence. We had Heritage out there. We had everything we talked about. We were getting all those reports done. We had the lender involved. Like we had paid a lot of costs to get the process started and to go through due diligence. And then at the end of that little 3-4 day stint that we were out there doing our physical due diligence, by the end of that, we just determined not to press forward. There were some absorption problems. The market had got hit really hard, like 2 to 3 years prior from a bad hurricane, and it still hadn't recovered. Like business side of the asset or of the market, businesses were just destroyed and weren't like they were closed for good, and it just wasn't in a good spot. And then absorption from like new apartments coming online, insurance money that had paid to completely basically renovate and rebuild at least 1,000 units in the surrounding area that were of similar asset classes in terms of like vintage, but then they were basically going to be Class A because it was all going to be brand new, and it was money that they got for free from the insurance company. So we couldn't really compete with that because we knew that they were going to charge similar rates, if not lower rates, and much more people were going to want to stay there because everything was brand new. And then you just couldn't take rents where you wanted to with where we were at, and we kind of got lied to a little bit from the property manager, and it was just, anyway, we decided to back out of that deal, and I think we lost like 30 grand or something. So So yeah, it's happened to us 3 times, technically 2 if you don't count the first tiny one. And only once with like a legit multifamily asset. So I wouldn't say it's super common because we've looked at, hundreds of deals, but so I wouldn't say that it's necessarily something that you should like trying to be preparing for or like adding into the business plan. But at the same time, it kind of is, when you're going and putting up that money, or you have a business partner that's helping you and going to be fronting some of the money. You have to be somewhat in a position, or your business partner has to be somewhat in a position that if you did lose the money, you're not out on the streets. You're still good.
Josh, when you say you looked at 100 deals or all these deals, or you're looking at a bunch of deals at once, you're just saying you're putting a bunch of deals in like your quick analyzer. And if that pans out, then you take it to the next stage of your analysis that goes a little deeper, might actually cost some money. At what point is it after the LOI is accepted that you bring in a heritage, or is it before?
No, it's after I actually get the PSA signed, and then it's typically a week or 2 after that, on average, depending on how busy they are. Now I'll give them a call or give them a shout or shoot them an email, say, hey, we just got this deal under LOI. We're in the process of working through getting it under contract. What's your schedule look like over the next couple of weeks? Love to get you out on site to come check out the property. But I don't actually want to pay them. I don't want to necessarily schedule anything or put any down payment or anything like that until the deal is legitimately under contract, because things can definitely fall apart between LOI and PSA. And then you just spent money for nothing.
Understood.
And for those of us that are new, Josh, what is PSA again?
Purchase and sale agreements. LOI is letter of intent. PSA, purchase and sale agreement. LOI is really the phase which you want to do the majority of your negotiations. This is before attorneys, so it's non-binding, and it's not costing you money because there's no attorney charging by the hour. So that's when I would like to do the most amount of back and forth negotiations, determining what makes the most sense financially. If we're trying to do like owner financing or something, do the back and forth there. Whatever we're negotiating on, I'd like to get a lot of that hashed out in the LOI phase. And then once we can agree, then we both sign the LOI. Again, non-binding, which is why I wouldn't start to do anything until you actually get it legitimately under contract, which is the binding agreement, which is the purchase and sale agreement. So once you get the signed LOI, you send that as the buyer. You're going to immediately send that to your real estate attorney, who's going to start drafting the PSA, and they're going to use all the terms that are in the LOI to draft the PSA. It'll probably just be a boiler template PSA that they'll use to primarily benefit you, since you're their client on the buyer side. And then they'll add all the specifics in the LOI. And so, at that point, now that you got the attorney involved, they're charging by the hour. Everything's super legal at this point once both parties sign it. So I'm still going to want him to review it all anyway. If the contract comes back and there's blood all over it and they've got red ink everywhere and they're like, nothing of this is right. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. This shouldn't be this much redlining. Right. But nonetheless, I'm still going to want the attorney to take a look at it, because I don't want to miss something that I probably would have missed, since I don't really, even now, as many times as we've done this, there's still probably things in the PSA that I don't know need to be in there, because we just fully trust our attorney and his ability to do what he does. That's why we pay him. So instead of wasting my headspace and wasting my time figuring all that out, just give it to him. He makes sure everything's good. And I'm like, sweet, then I'm good. Let's sign it.
Fair enough. Okay, thanks. And I know you have a lot of this in your videos, so I'll just keep going through the videos.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about blood on the paper, but everything else should be in there. Cool. All right. Well, it's 7 o'clock. Sweet. So what I'll do is I'll upload the